I'm delighted to invite our first speaker onto the stage. Please join me in welcoming Trinny Woodall. Welcome, welcome, Trinny. Now, someone said to me last week, oh God, what's one of the best things about your job? And I said, I get to interview Trinny at least twice a year because you are so charismatic and infectious. And I'm just going to start with some Trinny facts before we start chatting. Trinny London facts. So you launched the makeup and skincare brand in 2017, and you're an online-driven company with 1.9 million Facebook followers, more than 1 million Instagram followers, and 338,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's remarkable. Between March 2020 to January 2021, the brand grew by 280%, delivering 44 million in gross revenue in the year to March 2021. I think that deserves a round of applause because that is amazing. And the reason it's amazing is because I think there'll be many people in this room thinking, oh, but Trinny had a profile. We knew who she was before she started her business. And it's not like that. And I read an interview with you recently where you said, nobody becomes a great entrepreneur from a place of comfort. And that was your story because it was hard, wasn't it, getting started?
It was hard. And I had before, a very strong career. But I had made a decision in, I think, 2012 that I did want to start Trinny London. And I'd had the idea for many years, and I'd had the idea that I wanted to do portable, personalised makeup. And I'd met many, many women around the world. I'd done a show here on TV, but then I went round the world when it didn't work anymore here, and we were over as Flavour of the Month. And I did it in about 16 countries, and I learnt wherever I was in the world, there were the same women thinking, this is a stage in which I need a bit more help.
Yeah, midlife, it's that midlife range, isn't it?
Midlife, but it's less an age thing, and it's more, am I being included in what's being presented to me? And that's not always defined by age. In fact, when I went to fundraise, people said, what's the exact age group? And I said, it's as an attitude as much as it is an age thing. And that was very difficult to define that as a market because people want just a clear demographic. But I did, have the idea, and you work on idea a lot longer. When people look back reflectively at careers, they think, oh, you suddenly were on telly or you suddenly had this business. But suddenly being on telly took 8 years. Suddenly being a writer took 7 years. And suddenly being a CEO of a business that you described took 10 years. So I had the idea many years before I stopped doing telly. And then there was a point where I stopped doing telly because I just knew I wanted to build a business. And there's a big difference between being in a position where every August you're wondering if your contract will be renewed and building something that has sustainability in a way that it has a future, it can live, and it can grow into something you're really proud of. And that's what I wanted to do. And I knew that having met all these women, and I probably made over about 4,000 women in my career of 20 years, that I wanted to deliver them things that would really help them, that they felt were for them personally. So I worked on it, and I worked on it by myself for a while. And at that time, I'd stopped doing telly. I had, 15,000 Instagram followers. People forget people very quickly. Yeah. And I kind of like that because there's parts of being in the public eye that I don't particularly love. And so it just made me focus. But what had happened, and I was speaking about this earlier to somebody who's going to speak later, is we have this perception of our dreams of what we want in our life. And I had always wanted to own my own home. So I had spent forever looking at the house I wanted to buy, no manifestation in this, just like, walking down the street. And I want to be able to walk my daughter to school and not take her in the car. And I found this house and I bought it at the top end of what I was earning. And over the period between when I bought it and when I moved into it, my salary dropped by 80%. And so I was in it, wanting to start this business with a mortgage I couldn't afford. So the first thing I had to do is let go of the dream that this was the house I'd been, working 30 years in my career for, and realize it's only a materialistic thing that I do love, but I can have it again. That was a really hard thing to do, because by then I was divorced and I was living there with my daughter, and I wanted to also have this for her. But I just knew.
What kept you going, though? What stopped you from going, God, I'm losing stuff, I'm losing my house? What made you think, no?
Because you have to think of, you're gaining the possibility of a dream that could become something strong. And that is what did keep me going. It's like, there's times in my life when I kind of lived in that hovering land of it might never happen, but it won't not happen. I did that when I was having Lila, because I did many rounds of IVF. It wasn't dissimilar in that feeling of, I know I will have to let go of things for other things to come in my life. And the obvious one was I couldn't afford the mortgage. So I rented out my house to begin with. I rented a very small house off the Fulham Road, and I started the business there. And, we grew to being 28 people in this tiny 2-bedroom cottage where literally my office was the loo. I remember doing my Keyman medical, sitting on the loo seat with the doctor. The front bedroom by that stage was a little Trinny London studio because we wanted to get customers in to see what they felt about the product, even though we were online business. Downstairs, if you got up from the dining room table, somebody else sat down and then you had to sit on the stairs to do your meeting. It was really...
I know Bella, who's Trinny's fabulous PR, talks about you all sitting around the kitchen table trying different products. I mean, it's so hands-on. It was just
very,
so
very
many people in
hands-on.
this room will relate to that.
It was. And it was, and that is like... in the different stages of growing a business, one of the hardest things is to grow from that fantastic feeling of being an early founder when you can look up and know what everyone is doing on their laptop around you, and you have your head in everyone else's business. And you kind of need to do that when you start, because you need to understand if you've got the right people in the room to get you where you next need to get to. Right now, I'm in a very different position, which is about not being in the weeds and about being strategic. And I've just, in the last few months, had a really good CEO coach that I've taken on for myself in the C-suite to look at how I can empower the C-suite to do their job the best, as opposed to thinking I do their job for them.
Because I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? You get there, and then, well, you're never there because you're constantly growing, but then you're thinking, God, I've got to keep it going, and then it becomes, there are new challenges, aren't there? When
the challenges evolve. You're not thinking, oh, look, now some new challenges. They just evolve. So, I when I was in this little house, we had just about raised the money. We raised the money actually when I was still living in my old house. And I remember I went to see many, many investors. I went to see 29 VCs, and you talked about the VC landscape. We know that VC landscape isn't improving hugely, and we know that, in fact, last year it was 2% of businesses were fronted by female founders, more than fronted, but that word rings a bell when you're talking to male investors. So I just think there is a long way to go, and I did face that challenge tremendously, and I had to change the way that I spoke at meetings. I realized it's like what I think I do realize over the years is what can I do first before I think what other people can do? And I do have to take that responsibility and ownership, think what can I do? So I knew I'd go into a meeting and I'd want to give them the entire picture. I'd want to say, we're going to do this for women. My sweet spot might be 35 to 55 because nobody's talking to them. We're going to make it personalized. I'm going to do many verticals. We're going to have lots of online. We might do a few shops. And they were like, and the male form is not so good as the female form in being absorbed by a concept. So then I realized it was too like this. And I had to so then I was going in a meeting saying, we're going to do something. This is what it looks like. It stacks together. Have it to play with whilst I'm talking to you. I'm going to tell you we're going to do women. They're going to do women who feel they're not addressed in the marketplace. Some of these women will be 35 to 55. We're going to start online because I want to collect a tremendous amount of data on women and understand their needs so I can personalize to them even more. And we will do some retail, and we will be an omni-channel. And I want to grow this with a very good customer retention. And then they were like, okay.
There are not many Trinnys in the world. Putting your name to a brand is quite a big responsibility, and also it'd be a big thing in this room. Some people will be thinking of doing that. What are the pros and cons of putting your actual name to a brand? Great.
I think it depends on what your name has been associated with before. So my name had been associated with makeovers. And so for the business I was going into, that wasn't a bad association because it got your foot in the door. So it did get my foot in the door, but then you will have prejudgments. How would she know how to run a business? What are we going to do with a brand that has somebody's name above the door when we invest and it comes a time to have an exit for us? So there's those kind of pros and cons, but I think that there's many ways to talk those things through. So when I would go in, because I started my business trading commodities, so I did actually like finance before I liked making over women. I always want to make over women more than do finance. In fact, I hated doing finance, but I knew it. I knew how to read spreadsheets, understand data and figures. And so once they understood that I understood that in a room, then they sort of sat back a bit. And then looking at, your name is above the door, it helps you to, there's a tremendous amount of competition. But when I looked at that kind of thing that you might do when you're starting a business, of like the quadrants of where you sit in the marketplace, we were always here by ourselves a bit because we were in what was not really an addressed market at the time. So having a name there with somebody who epitomized that woman to an extent was helpful. And I think it has helped our business to grow quicker. And it just, there are many companies out there that don't have names addressed to them. And I think we are heading, we are in a recession. It is going to be a difficult 2 years for businesses that have maybe raised a lot of money and spent a lot, to get to our 50 million rev last year. We raised 7.9 million in total. So we've raised quite a small amount in proportion to where our rev got in 5 years. And I think if you raise like 20 million and you're doing this kind of, it's all new customer, and there isn't a name above the door, and you're quite generic as a brand, these next 2 years are going to be very challenging because you're going to have to find your point of difference quite quickly, and you're going to have to get your metrics in a much better position, and you're going to have to think about positive EBITDA, and you're going to have to think about how we're going to look at, customer retention and what does that look like. The parameters by which businesses are judged today is very different from when I fundraised a few years ago. Yeah.
Now, the great thing about your brand, or what you've done, is you've taken the mystique out of makeup. I don't know if you all feel like this, but historically, a makeup brand will bring out a mascara and then there'll be an A-list star on a motorbike in an advert, and we're all meant to know how it works and all meant to know what to do. And what you have done is you've handheld us all and helped us. And, I use your products. I was just saying earlier, I go to Phoenix, I buy them. I'm a huge, huge fan. But that's because you've given us all the confidence to use them. Did that just start organically because that's what you're like as a person, or did you set out to actually do something online that would really create a big community?
The community that we have started weirdly autonomously, separate from us. I can never get words out early in the morning. But I did know that the asset that I've always had is I will be the guinea pig. And so there are many makeup artists who started phenomenally successful makeup brands that we all know and are household names. And they're experts, and I knew I'd never compete with them, but none of those people had made over thousands of normal women. And so I knew what it was like. I knew what it was like to kind of think, how on earth do I do a smoky eye, and how should I do my lip? And, I do a tremendous amount of makeup videos which really aren't great, and I haven't got my glasses on, and, somebody, there's live comments saying, you need to blend in on the left eye, Trinny, But I think that's us. We aren't perfectionists. And so there is an element of, one thing I think people do know I do is I research a lot, and I'm fanatical about skincare, and I look at ingredients. And so when I made the decision of skincare, we actually have a lab. We create from scratch. We look at, what are those ingredients and how can we help women understand skincare should be in a routine, there are ingredients that are important for you, but also to address all the women who might never even be able to afford our product. And this is where company purpose comes in, because we're not a brand for every single pocket. There are many, many women who save up for our products because they know they have integrity and they're not white labeled. They know we do things from scratch and we think a lot about the formulations. But there is that sense of, how can we be there for other women? So the Trinny Tribe is a community that was started on Facebook, and it was started by a woman called Kelly in Northwest England, and she just followed me a bit, and Trinny London hadn't even launched. And then after we'd launched, there were suddenly 8 of these tribes, and they'd all but they'd all taken a bit of our logo or half a picture of me and put it on, and it was like we suddenly saw this thing mushrooming on Facebook. So we said, look, let's give you some titles in terms, they're calling themselves Trinny Tribe, but would you like a logo with your local area on it? So they said that would be great. So we live with this tribe, and this tribe are our harshest critics and our biggest champions. And some of them buy our products and some of them don't, because it's not in their wheelhouse to buy our products. But we support them in that greater DNA of me, probably, and there's a very large portion of them who do buy the brand. But when I'm talking to that wider community, I'll say, if you don't know skincare routine, do match me on Trinny London. Just understand the ingredients you should look for from other brands and make sure the order in which you put them on. Because as a brand to just stop at selling your products, I don't think in this day and age we can just be a brand that just sells a lipstick.
No.
I think you have to have this sense of what is your purpose. And we have a strong purpose. We have people who are associated in different sort of ways of that halo effect of the brand to either feel inspired to wake up in the morning when they feel shit and think, I'll wear some color today, or on the closest thing to think, I've woken up, I've had incredible skin, I'm 50, but my God, I've never had a skincare routine and my face has fallen in overnight, and then they think, I'll ask, Trinny London. And I want us to be that.
It's safe. It's a safe environment. It feels like, I don't know if anyone's experienced the Trinny Tribe, but Trinny had a pop-up in Covent Garden and I went along to it and it's just ferocious. I mean, they love you and, but they really not buy into it, but they really respect what you're telling them to do. And that's a huge responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
And one you take very seriously as well, because, they're sitting in their homes and you're here and sort of like it's the only connection you have. And so that's very, very important to you.
I try and have physical connection because I think when you are a brand that lives predominantly online, you need that physical manifestation of what the brand is. And so we made a decision. From day one, we sold in Australia. And I wanted because I remember in England when J. Crew started in these brands and we were just disregarded as unimportant as a market and we had to get it from friends in America. And I wanted Australians to realize we loved them from day one. So 2 days after we launched, there was an Australian on social saying, I got Trinny London products. That's amazing. I feel so included. And as a result of nurturing that community, it became about 15% of our sales. And so then we decided it's big enough for us to go and do localized warehousing. It's a big deal for us as a brand to suddenly localize warehousing because you have real back-end ERP systems. You have to implement a lot. So we did that over the last few months. And we then did 2 stores, and they're these, what I call kiosks, and they're in the Westfields there, right outside. We thought, let's plonk ourselves outside Sephora. And they're very big, and they're theatre, and the women wear sequins. Because I thought, what are we going to do in retail? What should retail be for our brand? Retail should be a place you go with your mates. And like Phoenix in London, 75% of the people go with their friend or their sister or their mother or their daughter. I love that camaraderie around shopping. Post-COVID, we want a camaraderie. We want a destination. We want to go out with our friends and have fun. So in that time, which is like 6 weeks that we opened it, I then went out and when we go out now, and some of the team are here who go with us, we do press, we do podcasts, we do a Trinny Tribe event. So we did this event at the stand. There were a lot of people there. Then I said, hey, I'm going to go to Zara for a shop up. Do you want to come with me? 200 people came with me into Zara.
We had a little following into the store.
And I just thought, this is the epitome of what we are. We do everything together. We're mates, and I love that about it. And because of that faith in the Australians, they're now 25% of our market. We did $1 million in 6 weeks on those 2 shops, and we did another 3 million online. And it was because we said to them, we want to offer you free shipping. We will bring a warehouse to you. The free shipping benchmark will now be £50 instead of 150. And all those people who'd followed us for a few years thought, now I can actually come in and try one product. And it's knowing you're being thought about. I think as a customer, you want to think, I'm being thought about. Yeah. And brands need to think, how are they showing those women or men or whoever you're addressing in the market that you're thinking about them a lot, literally every day.
Because they're handing over their money, and that's important. That's what I suppose you should never forget when you're running a business.
It's such a trust. Yeah, it's such a trust for somebody to hand you their money. It's like I remember when I went from doing TV, which is free, to doing books. And I remember my agent said to me, there's a huge change when somebody just watches you free and when they commit to buying your book because they trust you're going to give them something. They're giving you their hard-earned money and they'll trust you'll give them something in return. That is an exchange of trust. And I think it's a fundamentally important thing that as a business owner you have to remember is the trust somebody puts in you whenever they buy something and the responsibility you have of that trust.
You're in the business of making women feel good about themselves, and there'll be many people in this room who want to start a business. But we had a long chat on Zoom not long ago when you were talking about actually sometimes it's good just to have a change of image or think about yourself differently. What top tips can you give someone who's sort of front facing and wants to feel good? And
I think it's like, whenever you're going, you could be going to ask your bank manager for a loan. You could be going to pitch some things to your friends. You could be wanting to have some girlfriends around and thinking, I have an idea, can I talk to you about it? You could be going to see a VC. Whatever the situation is, I do always think about how am I coming across? I do think about that, and I do tweak it according to who I'm talking to. And I have also good luck things I carry on my body or wear or colours that, when I went to investor meetings, there were little things I would have and do.
What sort of things?
Well, like I'd always wear silver and yellow because I just felt, let me just subtly impart the brand. I always wear this ring when I do telly because then you never know when somebody asks you about it. And I did.
You could do the click, click.
Yeah, and I did the Today Show 2 weeks ago in New York, and at the end, you can only say they only mentioned the brand name once because that's the thing about TV. And then she said, what's that ring? Jenna Bush. And I went, oh, it's my brand, Trinny London. She went, oh, nice color. I want to try that. I said, okay, let me do your makeup now. And, it led to a nice opportunity of live on camera doing that. I can't remember your question now, but I think it's that
making
yes.
people
So
feel good
I
about
do.
themselves, yeah.
Like I'm just going to state this out, that this is a thing I believe intensely. 25% of women suit black, okay? And it looks amazing on them. But the other 75%, if they're doing something where they need to be seen and heard, should consider not wearing black. I'm just going to say it. Because it's like, when I'm interviewing people for a job, I remember the people who talk incredibly well and give you a vision. I hardly ever look at their CV. But I also remember not like how well they're dressed, because that's a real judgment call, but I remember, did they show any of their character of how they spoke in how they dressed? Or were those two things just so running in parallel and alien? Because I think there is a really important element to show a bit of who you are in how you dress. So I had this woman the other day who I was interviewing for heading up a retail role. And she came on camera and she had this bright blue bow, and she had this kind of blue dress, and she had this kind of mad bracelet on, all right? And I also introduced somebody else from a much bigger company for that role. I have no idea so much about her character or what she was wearing. So weirdly, the woman I should have liked more is the first one, because she had a very good CV from a brilliant competitor brand. But this other one, she stuck in my mind, and because she was like in this slightly weird way of dressing, I thought, I want to understand this woman to see, and then I said to her about 10 minutes into the interview, because there was a real problem with Zoom and stuff, and she got in a faff because she was used to Microsoft's Teams, so I knew she was nervous. So I then said, look, you obviously dress like this, so tell me about the part of you haven't talked to me about yet that makes you get up in the morning and dress like this. And then this woman came out.
You found her personality.
And I just thought, I remember her, and that's the woman that I'm going to get the team to meet that I'm putting forward for the role. There is a huge impact in not so much what we wear and where it's from, but how we attune that to the character we are that we want people to see. And if you think about it that way, it can help you to think how you're going to put yourself together for anything. So when I'm going to my investors, and I went to the one that finally invested in me, I remember exactly what I wore, and I remember what I said, and I remember how I spoke. But I was present in my clothes, and I wasn't wearing black.
Do you ever get nervous? I never feel like you get nervous.
I'm trying to think when I get nervous. Like when I did the Today Show a few weeks ago.
Is it a live audience?
Yeah, well, there's a live audience screaming outside from Rockefeller Center, and then there's the stream models. And then I think when somebody said to me, you've got to do 3 women's makeup in 5 minutes, I thought, Jesus Christ. And I'm not Tilbury or Laura Mercier or Bobby Brown. But weirdly, flukily, I did it with my fingers. But I was nervous when somebody told me that, and I thought, oh my God. But then when I was doing it, it's autopilot, and I enjoy it. And also when I'm, talking and doing camera stuff, I don't think of the camera. I just think I'm talking to lots of women out there, and let's give them the best information I can.
You gave an interview recently, actually, to the Telegraph magazine, and you were talking about actually people will be surprised to know that you can be quite an introvert, and at a party you might be the one hiding in the toilet. And I think a lot of people will be surprised to hear that about you. Are there 2 Trinnys? Are you on and then are you off? And how do you manage that?
I think that's when I'm least nervous when I'm meeting people I haven't met before. So when I do a Trinny type event, we love that. It's overwhelming, but it's great. We'll have like a few hundred people come, and I'll make sure I have a picture and speak to every single one. So it's at the end of the evening, it's like you are shattered because you give your all, because you know somebody's made such a big effort to get there. When I go to an event, okay, so I went to the Glamour Awards. We can discuss this. I went to the Glamour Awards. Very glamorous. But literally, I was the oldest woman in the room. In fact, there was Kim Cattrall. Kim Cattrall was in the room, and me. And I was like, I walked in this room, I thought, where's the loo? First thing, where's the loo? Let me just go to the loo and then come out, and then I can scan the room as I come out. So I went to the loo, and then there were some people in the loo quite excited to meet me, so it gave me a bit of confidence because they were like 12. And then I came out, and I was like, they were all there, and then, I think that's when I most think I'm most insignificant, and I least realize there are people there who are excited to meet me. And it's weird, but that's what I do feel. And I was like, I can't wait for us to sit down at the table so I don't have to stand here,
But the funny thing is, I was at that event too, and we're very lucky to be invited to those. And I was at the bar, and it was a really massive, massive place, so you could see everyone coming in and walking. And I watched you walk in thinking, God, she has walked in like nobody else. She has owned it. You walked in with Jenny Halpin, who is a great PR. You walked straight through, but you didn't see that in yourself. And isn't that funny how people don't?
Because I'm just tall thinking, where's the loo?
And I suppose, in a way, what's interesting about you is because when lockdown happened, so many people were having to pivot and rethink their businesses, but you had your business set up in that you had your camera in your dressing room. I'm sure many of you follow Trinny on Instagram, and I felt like you were my best friend, and I'm sure a lot of people do as well, because you have that interaction. When you're doing that style of business, whether it's be on a yoga mat on a Friday morning or, you're doing a tutorial, how much do you have to hold back for you? You were in your home, we're in your dressing room. So I'm sure people think they know every bit of your life, but they don't. And so do you have to really think about that? Save some for yourself? I
kind of feel that the dressing room in which I do my work is sort of my womb, but it is 10% of my work. I think that's what sometimes is the challenge for me, because the insecure businesswoman in me will say exactly what I'm saying here right now. Do you realize that's only 10% of what I do? Because 90% of what I do is running a business with 220 people in it. But a lot of people meet me and think what I do is I sit in a room full of clothes and I do lives. So that's weird. That's my ego thinking, I need you to kind of understand I've grown, I'll overcompensate. But when it was lockdown and when we did everything from home, I felt I think a lot of us felt very alienated. I'd kind of hang out with my friends once a week and would just all have a time we'll be on FaceTime together. But I found that connection very important to me. And when I was a bit flat, Charles, my partner, would say to me, go and chat to your ladies. You'll feel better. And I'll just get on and just chat. And there is there's a dividing line. What's interesting is where my daughter comes into that, because her bedroom is behind this kind of wall of clothing. So she sometimes will pop in, and then I think she was so used to the fact I'd always be on it that she just pops in and we chat, like on, I don't know, this weekend I was just thinking, let's have a chat about what we're watching. What's everyone else feel about The Crown? I've got two minds about that. Started chatting, and then Lai just pops in, and we just, she chats to me, and I think, oh God, here she goes. And she's thinking, oh, there's mother. And it's like, it's life, it's what happens. But I don't actually ever talk about my relationship, ever. That's like a very private thing for me, and I wouldn't. And I never do an interview if somebody says, can we just talk about all of you? So there is a very strict line for me on what I feel.
And that's important to you?
Super important.
Yeah. We have just running out of time. I can't bear it. I never want it to end. But what I would just like, some people here in the room who might be thinking of setting up a business, or their business is just in the early stages, what 2 pieces of advice can you give them to keep going through the next year?
Okay, how many of you are thinking about setting up business? Okay. How many of you have written your business plan? Okay. How many of you have seen any kind of investor? Okay. So right now, it's hard to raise money. It's not that easy. And the benchmarks are really important for investors. So I think the most important thing I needed to remember, and I think is always important, is when you go in front of an investor, half of what they'll feed back to you is from the flow of meetings they've had. It's that last meeting feedback, and it might not be relevant to your business. So at the end of those meetings where you felt it didn't work out and they gave you their feedback, you have to divide up between what maybe you need to think about because of what they said, and what is irrelevant to you, but they just said it anyway because they've had so many meetings and they're in a vein of something, okay? And that's one of the hardest things to separate out. I had somebody who said, your business would be better if you did it to millennials, because there's no way that old women who are 35 plus are going to buy online. I love that comment so much. I love meeting that person 4 years later at Founders Forum, actually. It was so joyful. But, so there's those important things. And also, the benchmarks are very important. How are you going to, when do you think? We did a very, very realistic 5-year plan, all right? And in fact, we hit all those figures. And I think it's being realistic. Men will be over-optimistic sometimes. And when you go into investor meeting, there is a tendency that if it's mainly male in the room, they'll say to you as a woman, how are you going to protect your downside? And they're going to ask a man, how are you going to get there? So I do feel if you're confronted by how are you going to protect your downside, you could have 2 really good answers, but you could follow it through with, I think also it's important for you to ask me the question of how do I get to my upside? And just challenge that, because I'm fed up with hearing those messages in a room and those different questions, whether you are a different sex. I think it's really inappropriate. And I was asked, I just have to end on something, because it's just like so corner of my mind. I had somebody, we're doing an offsite day with our C-suite. And so we want somebody to facilitate. And I had this, somebody suggested different people. So anyway, my CEO suggested this one person. And I saw him on paper, and I knew already, single white man, 62, living in Wales. He wasn't going to be right. But I didn't want to upset my CEO, so I said, okay, I'll talk to him. Anyway, talked to him, and I was on a roll because I just had a few good meetings. And he said, how do your C-suite manage you? Or just like this little word, I can't, it's even worse. Do you remember the word? Because I told you this. It was like, it was just handle you or something. And I just then said, I challenge all the time. I just say, I think that's such an inappropriate comment, and you'd never say that to a man. He goes, waff, 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 waff. And I go, actually, no. So I challenge and challenge and challenge. And even if I lose out on that investment, I still bloody challenge, because there needs to be permanent challenge here. And I think it's really, really important. And it shows a faith and belief in yourself and what you have to offer.
That's perfect way to end. Please join me. Thank you, Trinny. Thank you so much.